The Caribbean Sea, a historical crossroads, is now a geopolitical flashpoint. On October 18, 2025, the U.S. launched a military strike against a Venezuelan submarine, escalating tensions with Nicolas Maduro's government. This act marks a dangerous new chapter, raising questions about international law and sovereignty. The strike, part of a broader campaign, has turned a political standoff into a crisis, with unpredictable consequences for the Western Hemisphere. The implications are vast, affecting global markets and international law, as the Caribbean becomes the epicenter of a conflict with global ramifications. The world watches as two nations navigate a crisis that could spiral out of control. This moment demands a clear understanding of the facts and stakes to prevent further chaos. Since September, the U.S. military has launched 6 separate strikes in waters near Venezuela, a region that has become a focal point for international attention and controversy. These operations are part of a broader campaign that the U.S. says is aimed at disrupting the flow of illegal narcotics into North America. The primary targets are what officials refer to as narco-submarines, specially designed vessels that travel low in the water, making them difficult to detect by radar or aerial surveillance. These semi-submersibles are believed to be a key tool for drug traffickers, capable of carrying tons of cocaine and other illicit substances across international waters while evading law enforcement. In the most recent incident, a suspected narco-submarine was destroyed by U.S. forces. 2 individuals survived the attack and are now being held in U.S. custody. Their identities, backgrounds, and the circumstances of their capture remain shrouded in secrecy, with officials providing few details about their legal status or the evidence against them. The Trump administration has been quick to frame these military actions as a major victory in the ongoing war on drugs, insisting that the operations are necessary to dismantle powerful trafficking networks. Officials have repeatedly claimed that these networks operate with the tacit approval or even direct support of elements within the Venezuelan government. President Trump himself addressed the nation, stating, "This was not a group of innocent people," and emphasizing that the use of military force was both justified and necessary to protect American interests and security. Yet, despite these strong statements, there has been little independent verification of the U.S. claims. Journalists, human rights organizations, and international observers have all raised concerns about the lack of transparency and the absence of concrete evidence linking the destroyed vessels and their crews to drug trafficking. The ongoing campaign has resulted in at least 28 reported deaths, a toll that has sparked debate about the proportionality and legitimacy of the strikes. Critics argue that without clear proof, the true nature of the targets remains uncertain, and innocent lives may be at risk. The survival of 2 detainees could provide crucial insight into what really happened at sea. Their testimonies might clarify whether these operations are truly dismantling criminal networks or if mistakes have been made. However, unless their accounts are made public, many questions will remain unanswered. As calls for transparency grow louder, the international community is demanding a full accounting of the facts. Until more information is released, the story of these strikes and their true impact remains a matter of heated debate and global concern. The Trump administration justifies its military campaign as a fight against narco-terrorism, not Venezuela. Secretary of State Marco Rubio argues these vessels are part of a criminal network funneling drugs into the U.S. This narrative separates military action from state conflict, portraying it as law enforcement against a criminal enemy. President Trump claims conventional methods failed, invoking emergency powers to combat drug traffickers. However, a National Intelligence Council report found no evidence linking the Venezuelan government to these gangs. The administration's strategy blurs lines between policing and warfare, creating a legally ambiguous framework. This approach risks violating sovereignty and sets a dangerous precedent for international relations. Venezuela, led by President Maduro, condemned the U.S. attack as illegal and a violation of sovereignty. Caracas appealed to the UN Security Council, urging intervention to halt hostilities and prevent regional war. Venezuela frames the conflict as unlawful U.S. aggression, seeking to isolate the U.S. on the world stage. The international response has been one of concern, with UN experts labeling the strikes as extrajudicial executions. This challenges the U.S. justification and pressures the UN to address the crisis. Latin American countries express unease, fearing destabilization and a return to gunboat diplomacy. Venezuela's call for intervention resonates with broader anxiety about regional stability. The most devastating outcome of the recent military campaign is the irreplaceable loss of human life. Since September, 28 people have been killed, leaving behind shattered families and communities struggling to make sense of the tragedy. Each number represents a person, a story cut short, dreams unfulfilled, and loved ones left to mourn in silence. Despite the gravity of these events, the U.S. government has not released the names of those killed, nor provided any evidence to justify the deadly force used. This lack of transparency has only deepened the pain for families and fueled widespread speculation, as the public is left to grapple with unanswered questions and growing mistrust. In Trinidad and Tobago, one family's heartbreak has become a symbol of the personal anguish hidden behind international headlines. They believe their missing relative was among the dead, and their search for answers has been met with silence, amplifying their grief and sense of injustice. Colombian President Gustavo Petro has publicly stated that some of the victims were Colombian citizens, highlighting the cross-border impact of the operation. His remarks underscore how the consequences of these actions ripple far beyond any single nation, affecting families and communities across the region. Meanwhile, the two survivors of the submarine strike remain in U.S. custody. Their legal status is shrouded in uncertainty, raising concerns about their rights and the process that awaits them. Their fate hangs in the balance, as advocates call for due process and humane treatment. The testimony of these survivors could be crucial in uncovering what truly happened. Yet, there is a real risk that their voices will be silenced, either by legal barriers or political pressure, leaving the full story untold and justice out of reach. The administration's ongoing silence not only dehumanizes the victims, but also serves to justify further military action, while dismissing legitimate concerns about civilian harm and accountability. This approach has sparked outrage among human rights groups and ordinary citizens alike. Without transparency or evidence, the U.S. risks being seen as judge, jury, and executioner, undermining its own moral authority and eroding trust both at home and abroad. The world is left waiting for answers as the call for accountability grows louder. The legality of U.S. strikes in the Caribbean has ignited a fierce and ongoing debate among legal experts, government officials, and international observers. These actions have drawn sharp criticism and concern from both regional leaders and the broader global community, who question the legitimacy and long-term consequences of such operations. Under international law, the use of military force against another nation's territory is generally prohibited, except in very specific circumstances, namely, self-defense, or with explicit authorization from the United Nations Security Council. The UN Charter is clear on these points, aiming to prevent unilateral military interventions that could destabilize regions or set dangerous precedents. Despite these restrictions, the Trump administration has justified its actions by adopting a broad, unilateral interpretation of its right to act against perceived threats, arguing that national security interests override traditional legal boundaries. Traditionally, drug trafficking is considered a law enforcement issue, handled by police and judicial systems rather than military forces. Treating it as an act of war marks a significant departure from established norms. By deploying military assets and treating traffickers as enemy combatants, the U.S. is effectively blurring the line between criminal justice and armed conflict, even though there is no formal declaration of war with Venezuela or other Caribbean nations. United Nations experts and human rights advocates have condemned these strikes, labeling them as extrajudicial executions. They argue that such actions violate fundamental principles of due process and international law, raising serious questions about accountability and justice. Within the United States, the legal foundation for these strikes is also hotly contested. Critics maintain that the operations may violate the War Powers Resolution, which limits the president's authority to engage in military action without congressional approval. Ultimately, this blurring of law enforcement and military action not only sets a troubling precedent for future interventions, but also threatens to undermine the international legal order that has been carefully constructed to maintain peace and stability among nations. The strikes result from a breakdown in U.S.-Venezuela relations in 2025. Initial diplomatic outreach was short-lived, with the U.S. escalating rhetoric and pressure by August. The increased bounty on Maduro signaled a shift from negotiation to regime change. The halt of diplomatic missions removed peaceful resolution options, leading to military action. The strikes are the violent conclusion of a policy dismantling peaceful engagement opportunities. The diplomatic fallout isolates the U.S. and alarms global nations. Admiral Halsey's resignation hints at internal disagreements over the confrontation's wisdom. This internal dissent and international condemnation highlight deep divisions caused by high-risk policies. The U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean transforms the region into a militarized zone. Approximately 10,000 U.S. forces operate there, with advanced military hardware signaling seriousness beyond counter-narcotics. The restructuring suggests preparation for larger-scale intervention, moving from policing to warfighting. The deployment serves as a tool of intimidation, coercing concessions from Venezuela. However, this concentration of power creates a volatile environment, risking full-blown war from miscalculations. A single misstep could trigger a rapid spiral of retaliation, threatening regional peace. The military buildup, intended to project strength, introduces instability and risk. The U.S. military campaign in the Caribbean pushes a geopolitical rivalry to a perilous brink. The war on narco-terrorism justifies actions seen as illegal extrajudicial killings by many. The crisis underscores the danger of dismantling diplomatic channels, leading to escalation. Dialogue is vital for responsible leadership and preventing conflict. The events highlight the importance of adhering to international law and respecting state behavior norms. Unilateral lethal strikes erode international legal order, damaging America's moral standing. The path forward requires de-escalation and a return to diplomacy, with the UN demanding a halt to strikes. The world watches, and choices made now will have lasting consequences.